So, I really love finding new servers on Minecraft to explore and play with friends on. After a while, I think that Hypixel and the other basic ones like that can get a little bit monotonous and boring, and I think it's great to change it up. So, when I was invited to check out a server from a mysterious person on Discord, I took that chance. The server in question is called RandomCraft, and my new best friend Corger invited me, and I went and checked it out. I should say that I was not paid or sponsored to do this. This is all my opinion and just honest reaction to the server itself. So, you might be wondering, what is RandomCraft? RandomCraft is a small minigame server that was released about a year or two ago. And it holds your classic minigames such as Sky Wars, Bed Wars, Hide and Seek, Death Run, Trouble in Mineville, Gravity, Block Party, and Splag. They also have Skyblock, but we'll get to that later. My first impression from just coming into the server itself was the lobby. It is stunning and so ornate. You'll find in the lobby that each game is clearly labeled with its own area that you can walk to go play the games, but if you don't want to walk, you can also go up to the figures in the front that all are clearly marked for their own games, or you can also do /play and then the abbreviation of whatever game you want to play. But the lobby is just beautiful. That was the first thing I noticed. And although after starting to explore a little bit, I found the lobby map to be quite large, it's still relatively explorable after you kind of escape the valley that the main hub is kind of located in. There were a bunch of areas to walk around and explore, and that's not even talking about the games. So what about the games? I gathered some viewers from my Discord server, and we played through each and every game and kind of discussed our thoughts about them. And as a side note, I should just say that every game lobby was also just as detailed as the main lobby. And another little detail that you might want to know is that most of the games let you vote on the maps. So to start, let's talk about Sky Wars. You know how Sky Wars works. It's one of the most basic minigames that you'll find in any Minecraft server, and this game was no exception to following the basic principles of Sky Wars. The maps were pretty, and the one thing that I found to be slightly different from maybe other potential servers you might play on with Sky Wars is that in this version, when you spawned in, you got a basic set of tools. So you got a sword, a pickaxe, and some stone to build with. And overall, it played like Sky Wars. It wasn't reinventing the wheel, which is okay. It was still, if you like Sky Wars, you will like this game because it is Sky Wars. It is very basic. Now, the biggest issue that I found with this game was, unfortunately, the lag. We couldn't get through a whole game before we all lagged out, which was incredibly unfortunate because the maps were really pretty and I wanted to explore more of them, and also just play the game as is. They also have a Team Sky Wars, which I think is a team of 2, if I'm not mistaken. But I think that would have been a lot of fun to play as well, but we didn't get to go to it just because of the lag. This would be a great staple game to have if they can just fix that lag issue. Overall, would have been perfect minus that, but the lag made it unplayable at times, unfortunately. It's Sky Wars, yeah. So, Bed Wars. You guys know how this game works. You protect your bed, destroy other people's beds, and you're the last one standing is at least the goal. And this, again, has the normal fun of Bed Wars. It's a classic game that many servers have adopted now. This one in particular, I found the gen to be quite slow, however you could upgrade it, which I did like. Now, the upgrade and purchasing system for this version of Bed Wars in particular was a little bit different than what you might see. And because it is a little bit different, it can be a little bit confusing at first to navigate. What I ended up finding out is not one item would buy you a certain type of, thing, for example. So, diamonds, iron, gold, emeralds would all buy an assortment of different items, different blocks, different weapons, different armor, a whole bunch of different things. For example, diamonds could buy you a bow, or it could buy you a diamond axe, or an iron pickaxe, stuff like that. Whereas emeralds would get you the best stuff in the game, including the best upgrades. So your sharpness, your protection, all came from emeralds. Which, honestly, I kind of liked, because it meant that you had to go out to get every single resource if you wanted the best gear. You couldn't just sit back at your base and ignore the world, which I enjoyed. I think it brought a little bit more of a connectivity and challenge because you had to get everything and you had to be making constant trips away from your base to upgrade. Now, the one issue with the purchase system that I personally found was that some of the things were very expensive. Bed Wars is a very fast-paced game, and most games will not last long enough for you to be able to utilize the purchase system and those items that are there, which is a real shame because they have some really unique items. Some of the things I saw personally were there were traps that you could buy to put at your base to protect your bed. There were different little gadgets that you could use. There were, I remember snowballs specifically were something that you could use, and it would send out a flurry of snowballs to basically knock your opponent off of their bridge, which I thought was very interesting. It was something new, and I really liked that. I also really liked the idea of using emeralds to buy your upgrades because they are so highly coveted. However, because of the fast-paced nature, the prices made it very hard to get these items, and I don't think I used most of the different things that were there, unfortunately. I think with a little bit of tweaking on the prices, people would be able to, those would be more accessible. Not that they all need to be accessible, because some of those items are definitely luxury items, but to tweak it just a little bit cheaper, I think would make the game a lot more fun and be able to really highlight the unique aspects of this version of Bed Wars. Because I think some of their changes were very smart and very good changes, and I think it makes it their own Bed Wars. It makes it RandomCraft's Bed Wars, not just a basic Bed Wars game. So overall, I really enjoyed it. I just think that the prices needed to be shifted a little bit, but other than that, it was great. Once again, the maps were beautiful. We had a great time. I just wanted to see more from those items that they were giving us. Hide and seek! It was a ton of fun. Overall, it didn't overhaul the whole concept of, your basic hide and seek, but was still enjoyable to play. The maps were, once again, beautiful. You're going to notice a common theme here. The builders put in a lot of work on this server, but the maps felt large enough to find a very good spot to hide as a hider, but not so large that as a seeker there was too much ground to cover in the time that we had. It was more about finding a high-quality spot than trying to get to the edge of the map and hide in a corner somewhere, for me personally. There were times where I was hiding pretty close to where the hunters were spawning, but because I had found a good hiding spot, that didn't matter, per se. I was able to stay there for longer. Something unique to this server that I found were that certain blocks were free for you to use, however others you needed to purchase with tokens, which, after doing a little bit of research, basically you get your tokens from playing some games. Now, to be clear, the blocks that you are given are all blocks that relate to the map that you are on, so you're not at any disadvantage for not having tokens. In fact, I personally think that using tokens on certain blocks meant that you were at a disadvantage for using that block because they were less common in those places, in the maps. So you weren't put at any disadvantage to have tokens, it was just if you had them, you could create a more challenging game for yourself by buying a specific block that might not be as common, and having to find a more specific spot that worked for that block, which I think is interesting and okay, and especially as you are on the server more, and are increasing your skill in their hide and seek and a little bit more knowledgeable in their maps, it could be fun to add that challenge. Another thing I noticed in hide and seek was that the hiders were able to have taunts. There were quite a variety of them. There were some that were specifically sound cues, and some that also had a visual cue along with them. There were others that you had to purchase with tokens as well, which, once again, did not feel like much of a hindrance and more just something that would be a perk, but isn't necessarily hurting me to not have. There were plenty of non-token taunts to use, and I thought that was good. There were also cooldowns on some of the taunts, so you couldn't just repeatedly sabotage yourself by repeatedly playing the sound, which, once again, I really enjoyed having that. Overall, hide and seek, once again, was not anything particularly original or trying to invent something new with itself, and that's okay. It was still a good minigame, and still set out what it wanted to achieve, and I think is a great staple to have in their server. RandomCraft also has Death Run, which is quite fun, and it plays pretty much the same as other death runs that you might find on other servers. The maps were still unique, and were beautiful, as per usual. Now, to request to be death, you had to physically go up to an NPC in the waiting lobby, and sometimes there was less or more time to do that. And I thought that was kind of an odd detail. I don't hate it, just because then it's not someone that's automatically picked to be Death if someone doesn't want to be Death, which I think is okay. But it took me a couple rounds to figure that out, that it was an actual thing that you had to go find. At times, lag became an issue in the game. It wasn't anything that was absolutely debilitating. The game still played fine, even with the lag at times. It was just there were a couple times in particular that the lag did cause me to die, but since you respawn, no matter how many times you die, at least to my knowledge, because I died a lot, it doesn't affect you too much, you just get slowed down a little bit. So at the end of the day, it wasn't a huge deal, just a little bit of a hindrance. I found the lag to be at its worst when I tried to use the strafes that I had, and that's when it usually affected me the most, is just because that is so dependent on you moving so well. So it worked out, it was not awful, it was just a little bit annoying at times. There was one time in particular I had a glitchiness issue of being killed before I was in one of the challenge spaces, which is probably pretty easily fixable. It was only an issue one time in one specific spot on one map. So overall, I didn't find that to be a huge hindrance either. It was the only real time I found glitches in the minigames, and is probably just a fluke for the one map I was on. So unfortunate, but not a big deal. I found the game to be actually decently challenging, but it was a lot of fun. It tested my skills to fake out the death person. It challenged my parkour skills, my critical thinking, etc., and just made it for a fun, challenging game. I really liked it. The other thing I really enjoyed about Death Run in particular that I noticed very quickly was that it worked very well with a small party size. You could play it with just a few people and be very happy, and it would work out just fine. It was very enjoyable, even with about 5 people, myself included. Which, this isn't to say that the other games didn't play well with the small groups, but this was one of those that it really showed that you didn't need to have a large group, and I really liked that. Overall, I found Death Run to be a pretty fun game. I really enjoyed it, and the hindrances that I did have did not completely ruin the game for me, and are, you know, at the end of the day, not absolute, like, deal breakers for me to not play the game anymore. It was great, it was all put together, it was beautiful, it was fun, it was challenging. I really enjoyed Death Run. Trouble in Mineville. Essentially, how the game works is it's basically a murder mystery. You collect items to defend yourself, and then there are innocents, a detective, and at least one killer. The goal is to find the killer and kill them, or if you're the killer, kill everybody else. Overall, I found the maps to be very beautiful and, once again, very well built. I found that they were not too big or too small, and there was enough space to explore, or if you're the murderer, covertly kill people, which worked out very well for most people. I really liked only being able to open about 5 chests, and I never needed to open more than about 4 for the weapons that I needed for the whole game. I found that it prevented people from taking everything on the map and leaving other people who weren't as fast with nothing to use for the whole game. I never found that I didn't have enough with only having 5 chests. I found it to be a non-issue. Overall, I think it was a very good choice on the developer's end, and I think, especially with a larger group, it could definitely help some people in the long run. Another aspect of the game I really liked was having to collect gold to buy gadgets or to prove your innocence in the test chamber. I really like this because it prevents everybody from gathering and huddling right at that test chamber and making the killer's job 10 times harder because everybody's proved their innocence and is staying as a group. It means that people had to go venture out and kind of makes the group a lot smaller and a lot easier to pick people off. And it makes everybody else have to be a lot more alert, which I really, really enjoyed. I think this game is definitely meant to be played with a larger group than just 5 people, and it really diminished our enjoyment of the game because there were only 5 of us. The games went a lot quicker, and were not always as, I think, exciting or mysterious as they could have been. It's okay to have larger group games, but unfortunately this one's just not made for smaller groups, and I think we would have enjoyed it a lot more if there were more of us, unfortunately. But even with our group of 5, it was still a fun game, and there was definitely a lot to love. Overall, I really enjoyed Trouble in Mineville. There were really no big issues besides just having a small group. There's not much the devs can do about that, so honestly, I don't have many complaints at all. I really, really like the concept of the game, and it was good quality overall. Gravity is pretty familiar for most people. Once again, it is a game where you're essentially doing droppers and trying to be the first one to make it through 5 different dropper maps to win. It was a lot of fun, they had a lot of good maps. The maps were challenging, but not to the point of being impossible. I have played other dropper games and found that some of the maps are just too hard for me. They are too much of a challenge, I simply cannot get past them. I have a lot of issues. I did not have this problem on these maps, which could be good for some people, worse for others. As a more casual Gravity player, I found that to be a very good thing, because it just took me to use a little bit of problem-solving skills to find the correct area to be in, and to position myself to actually continue the game and potentially win. I will say, I have been complimenting the maps thus far, and this one's no different. There were many good maps, but there was one in particular that looked very familiar, and I don't know the intricacies of different maps and different servers and how map sharing works, so I'm not going to comment on that, but I will say I don't know about the originality of all of their maps, but they were pretty. They were well built, and there were some that were very unique in where the water was at the end, which I really enjoyed. I think it added a little bit of dynamacy to the whole game, and it kind of kept you on your feet, and didn't make it made it more exciting and less boring, which I really enjoyed. I was just a little bit confused to see that one map that I've seen before in other servers. That was my only big concern map-wise, but other than that, they were beautiful maps. I liked the different styles that they were in, and the different spots where the water was that kept you on your toes. Once again, this is a game that can be played with just a few people, which I really, really liked, just because, again, this is a pretty small server, so you're not necessarily going to have a whole bunch of people playing with you, and so to have a game that works with a small or large group is always good. I really enjoyed Gravity overall. It's a ton of fun. It's becoming more and more of a classic game in other servers, as I've noticed, and it worked really well for here. Now, Block Party. Essentially, if you've never played Block Party, the whole premise is to try to find the correct color on the floor before the timer runs out, and then you basically do that over and over, round by round, until you're the last person standing. The timer usually gets smaller and smaller until it's basically just a couple seconds that you have to react to get to the right color. This game is very simple, but very fun. And I quite liked it was about a 3-second cooldown normally that you have, which is an audio cue. Now, as the timer gets shorter and shorter, let's say you get down to only 2 seconds, you're only going to hear 2 of those audio cues. But I appreciated having that, and I thought it was very good and a great addition. The biggest issue I had with the game itself was that at times it was a little bit dark while playing. Obviously, I can just turn my brightness up, but when I was playing originally, there was at one point it was quite dark, and it caused me to struggle a little bit. But it just meant that I had to pay a little bit more attention and or just change my brightness settings at the end of the day. The floor designs were beautiful and lovely, and I loved them so much. They were great. They were pretty, they were different each time. There wasn't really one style that I found, which I really liked. They did include power-ups in this game, which is not a bad thing. But I wish they made the game a little bit more interesting. They didn't seem to have a whole lot of impact on the gameplay. This is for better or for worse, but overall I wish that they were a little bit more important or did a little bit more. Because I felt like they didn't really add a lot to the game. There was one that did, as it added like a little splatter on the floor of what I assume is normally the color that you need. But other than that, they didn't seem to be used much, as most people weren't paying attention or going for them because of the risks it could pose to you losing because you're not where you're supposed to be on your color. So, they're okay. I think they could be tweaked a little bit to be more important to the game, and actually help people a little bit more, and be more incentivized to go and grab. There was also no background music in this version of Block Party, and I know in some other versions of this game, people do have background music. I actually liked that there wasn't background music, and this is coming from a purely streamer perspective. I have found that when there is background music in block parties, that oftentimes if I don't turn that music off, I will get copyright striked. And so to have no background music to worry about was very nice. because most don't use royalty-free music. So if they ever do add background music, which they can if they want, A, make it toggleable, and B, keep it royalty-free to protect streamers. Overall, it was a fun game. It's very simple. It can be played with a smaller number of people, but I think also benefits from a larger group as well, just to kind of make the game last a little bit longer, but overall was very good, and I didn't think numbers had a big impact on the game overall. So it was great. Loved it. It's finally time to talk about Splig. Splig is by far the best game this server has to offer. It is the magnum opus, if you will, of this server. It is so unbelievably fun. All of the maps were different, but beautiful, and the uniqueness of how they were built often impacted the gameplay. In my opinion, I think it was for the better. It caused us to have different experiences every time, and caused our strategies to be different on how we played the game, which I really, really enjoyed. The power-ups in Splig matter a lot more than they do in the other games that do have them, and could sometimes decide the game. Now, I personally think the power-ups are overall for the better of this game, although there were a couple that I found to be a little bit too OP. There was one that would upgrade your egg gun that basically, if you were within too close of a range, would basically decide the game in a 1v1. Some of the power-ups that you could see were invisibility, putting pumpkins on people's heads, placeable TNT, different gun types, and a lot more, likely, that I just didn't see. And even with the one overpowered gun, there were times that it didn't decide the game. There were just a couple, there were a couple too many that it did, unfortunately, and so I think that's the only power-up that I really had any issue with. All the other ones impacted the game, but they didn't straight up decide it, and I think that was very good design on the developer's part. This game works with smaller or larger groups. We played it with as few as like 3 or 4 and as much as about 7 people, and had no issue with any of those groups. It was fun in 1v1 settings, as these games could last sometimes a little bit long and sometimes a little bit short, but overall were fun no matter what. Really enjoyed them. They would probably work with even smaller than just 4. I think a 1v1 would still be very fun. When I say we played this for literal hours after I finished getting footage for this video, I mean it. We played for like a solid 2 hours after footage collecting. That's how fun this game is. It's a little bit addicting, but I love it so much. And the biggest plus was that it was never laggy or buggy, despite the fact that it had those power-ups, and there was a lot going on in the game with all of the eggs being thrown, and the blocks being destroyed, and the TNT. It very well could have been buggy, and I would not have faulted them for it, yet it wasn't. It worked beautifully. It was by far my favorite game. I think I'm going to speak for my viewers when I say this. I think it was everybody's favorite in the party. Was the perfect example of how great this server could be. And I just genuinely enjoyed Splig so much. It is one of the best games and you need to play it. Finally, we need to talk about RandomCraft and their Skyblock. This is their newest game and it's still in beta, although it is a public beta. It is their only game that is in 1.18 plus, as the other ones I played in 1.8.9. And because it's still in beta, it is technically still unfinished and being worked on, and they are still looking through bugs, and so take what I say with a pinch of salt. So, to begin, there is a lot to explore in this game. You spawn into like a little town, as you might be familiar with in other versions of Skyblock. However, I personally found that I was not overwhelmed. I think they did a very good job of taking it bit by bit for you, and not just throwing you out into the world and saying, good luck! I was easily able to keep track of my objectives just using /journal, and occasionally there was an arrow that would help guide me to where my objective needed me to go. However, this arrow was a little bit inconsistent and a little bit buggy at times. However, I think as they continue to develop it, hopefully this will become less and less of an issue. Overall, the town square was very well built. There were some places that were labeled, which was incredibly helpful. And honestly, I wish more places were labeled besides just the auction house, because it was very nice to have some kind of indication of where I was going. because there are quite a few little buildings in the town square. There were also times where I wish the objectives were a little bit more detailed in what they wanted me to do or where I needed to go. For example, there was a quest I was given, objective, whatever you'd like to call it, where the Switch said, hey, I need 64 nether wart. And then she just didn't tell me where to get the nether wart, and I didn't know what to do, and kinda had to give up on that objective and do something else because I just didn't know where to get it. Which this could be that I just don't have the level to go get nether wart, but if that's the case, why wouldn't I have this objective given to me at a later point, or it's something that is only unlockable as I get to a certain level? Speaking of levels, I liked how some things were restricted by level. I thought that was smart and probably protects the player. However, there were some things that should have been level locked, but were not. There was a spot where you could fight dragons and some skeletons, and it was not meant for new players. And I may have been curb stomped a few times. Now, besides all of that, this is, again, still in progress, and so the bugs are there. There were lucky blocks that you're supposed to find, and I think the premise is you break them, it gives you an item, and it disappears. Wow, fun little Easter egg. Problem is, for us, we would break them, except they wouldn't stay broken, they would respawn back in that spot, essentially. So we just kept getting items every time we broke them, and could just sit there and keep breaking them, and getting all the stuff, which is not fair, and Corger was quick to try to patch that up, which is to say cover the lucky blocks so we couldn't abuse them, which is fair. So, as far as your personal island went, it was quaint, and overall a great base island. I mean, it's a skyblock island, it's pretty basic. I liked the designing that they put into it, which I know can only be so much, but I liked the design of the rocks on the side, and I thought the tree looked kind of nice. Simple stuff, but it's still counted in my book, so not to worry. Now, your island can only be so big, and you will have to upgrade it if you want to upgrade the size of your island. So there are borders around it, which is okay, not a big deal. But it's something to just keep in mind that you will have to upgrade it, and you can only get so big until you actually upgrade it. The island also had everything you basically needed to get started in a little chest, and was overall pretty chill. You can also create a group island with your friends if you'd like to, which I really thought was a very good touch. Personally, I don't love super grindy games like Skyblock, so this isn't really for me, but I still really enjoyed myself overall, and I really liked exploring the town and the surrounding area and doing the quests. That was probably my favorite part about it, and I really liked that I could do that and not be stuck just grinding for stuff. I thought that was a good touch, and I think it makes it more accessible for other types of players besides those who really like Skyblock. Now, if you're wondering, you can buy a premium battle pass for more quests and rewards, or buy a random crate key to get stuff like coins, armors and tool skins, and legendary items. I mention this because I really like how, although you can buy stuff, you don't have to, and it will not overall impact your game negatively. You can still enjoy the game and make great progress without those items, and I think that's a very good touch. Now, I just want to talk about the server overall a little bit. At the end of the day, this server is very fun and is obviously made with so much love. The staff are passionate about the server and the work that they're doing within it, and I met some really great people just from testing it out. I think that overall, the server suffers the most from a lack of activity, because it doesn't have a consistent number of players on at all times like you would see with much larger servers. Now, despite that fact, it is still playable and enjoyable if you just have a group of friends. I definitely recommend playing if you just have a group to play with. If they continue to just fix bugs and sort out some lag that they have in some of the games, this server will be amazing and will do such great things. I know they have more games on the way, according to their website, and I'm really excited to see what they do. This is a great server, and I'm excited to see where they go, especially if they can take the initiative to fix some of the bugs and issues that it suffers from. Now, if you would like to go onto this server, their IP is play.randomcraft.org. I will link their Discord, and I will also put their IP in the description if you'd like to check it out. And yeah, overall, great server, and I really love it. I'd like to give a special thanks to Corger and Kitty, who joined us and helped us with any of our questions or issues, and are just great staff members that we were able to chat with. And I'd also like to give a special thanks to Harvey, Dinnerbone, Viz, and Levis for joining me and testing out the server. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye!